We were like sitting ducks. They could have taken the planes off and taken the Kirk out and all the Vietnamese ships, and we had no idea how they were going to react.
Fortunately, no hostile attack came, and the crew refocused its attention on the task at hand, aiding refugees.
We finally got underway, and how we actually determined the formation, it was a very long formation, probably 5 miles from van to the rear, and it was 2 columns, 16 ships in each column, 2 parallel columns, probably a mile apart, or a little less than that, and we proceeded east.
Kirk could steam only as fast as the slowest vessel in the convoy, a speed that would seldom exceed 5 knots.
And the entire idea of defending this convoy against attack just evaporated, and it became then taking the dock on house calls and delivering rice and delivering medicine.
Well, Doc Burwinkle's responsibility for 30,000 or so Vietnamese was unheard of, and we kept track of him as best we could, keeping in touch with the ships as he was going from one to the other and back and forth. But he was such our beloved Doc that we all were concerned about him.
Chief Burwinkle was tireless. He was a country doctor making house calls, but he had 30,000 patients, and he didn't have a little Jeep to drive around in. He had a boat.
And we used it to steam up and down the columns of the Vietnamese ships, and I would go aboard ship and see what I could do as far as medical-wise to help these people out.
And sometimes we used an old decrepit swift boat that sometimes it was our motor whaleboat, but it was Chief Burwinkle, and just going from ship to ship to ship, and he would spend hours just screening all sorts of problems. And how he did it is beyond me. But he's a wonderful man, wonderful doctor, and he was absolutely what we needed at that time. He's not a doctor, of course. We call him Doc. He's a hospital corpsman, but he's an independent duty hospital corpsman, very capable. I would have anointed him doctor after we got into Subic just because of what he did.
Whatever he needed in the logistics train, from food, water, medical supplies, we'd bring it to him by whaleboat or gig, or however it means we could get it to him. And he was up there on the front end of seeing the real live medical problems of these 30,000 people.
And these refugees, crowded together in tropical heat without adequate food and water, had their share of medical issues: dehydration, diarrhea, and conjunctivitis.
So I was very much afraid of that conjunctivitis spreading, because it is a very, very virulent illness. And if you've ever had pink eye, your eyes swell shut, you cannot see, and it's easily contaminated through your hands, touching your eyes, touching a handle, touching another person.
On the first day when we arrived down there, Doc Burwinkle went around with all his medical supplies, having sick call at each one of these ships. And then as we get them underway, he comes up to me and says, "Oh, by the way, Captain, now what do we do? Well, I have no medical supplies." So I said, "I'll get on the phone to 7th Fleet," and within a matter of hours we had Air Force C-130s dropping 55-gallon drums in the water right alongside of our whaleboat, and we would wrestle them into the boat, and that's how we got our medical supplies for the 30,000 people.
The Air Force sent out C-130s, and they dropped various supplies in barrels to me, basically dressings, eye ointment, anti-diarrheal medicine, and baby diapers and formula.
As Chief Burwinkle and his assistant, Hospital Corpsman 3rd Class Falkenberg, continued their nautical rounds in the South China Sea, Kirk offered assistance to other vessels that required emergency repairs.
We got word that we were going to plot a course and pull alongside another ship. Usually you see another ship and you see 1 or 2 people outside. You go about 500 yards off the ship and see the whole deck just covered with people. It's astounding.
So I figured, gee, if there's that many people we could see who are on deck, I figured below deck there had to be at least twice that number.
They were just thousands of people, as many as you could get on board, and they were sitting, standing, you know, they were just crammed on, just like the Hueys, you know, they were just overloaded to the max.
I stepped outside and it was just overwhelmed with emotion, along with everybody else there. There was just thousands of people on top of this deck, and you're looking down at them, and I took a few pictures, and I just had to stop taking pictures. I felt bad about taking pictures. I can't really describe the look on these people's faces. They have that look about them. They're fleeing, so in one way they're happy, but in the other way they really don't know where they're going. It's sort of a blank, odd stare.
What these refugees had endured in escaping from their homeland could only be imagined by the crew members of USS Kirk. The reality was even more harrowing for some. 17-year-old Lon Tron was in her 9th month of pregnancy. As Saigon came under attack and descended into chaos, she became separated from her husband, an officer in the South Vietnamese Air Force. With her mother, she managed to find her way to the Saigon River and board a family-owned boat where many of her relatives had taken flight. After a hazardous voyage down the river, they reached the open sea.
When we got on the ocean for a few days, we entered to international water, and I saw a very, very big ship. And in my heart, I know this must be American ship. They brought us food and water, and everyone was so grateful and happy because we knew we would survive and American would help us.
We had a lot of pregnant women in this fleet. Some of them were more pregnant than others, 7, 8, 9 months. So I said, Doc, you better get them in one place. He said, well, let's put them on the Kirk, so I can deal with them early in the morning before I go do my rounds.
Aboard his commandeered swift boat, Chief Burwinkle moved among the columns of Vietnamese vessels seeking out near-term pregnant women. While on his search, the chief hospital corpsman encountered an English-speaking Vietnamese named Joseph Pham. Pham would prove to be a godsend as Kirk's very busy interpreter.
I raised my hand and they picked me and they said, okay, my wife is also pregnant. So from that time on, they took my wife and 4 other expectant mothers to be transferred to the Kirk.
Pham soon volunteered to accompany Chief Burwinkle on his rounds, where his language skills proved invaluable.
I would join Chief Burwinkle and his men and to bring water, medicine, and food to the refugee ship. And I know that there's not much food or supplies on the ship, but the sailors share what they have and what they could to provide help and give assistance to the refugees, which we were very thankful and we touched by the gesture.
One day, Mr. Pham, the translator for U.S. Navy, he had come aboard the Vietnamese Navy ship and let us know Captain Jacobs allowing anyone in need of medical, also including the pregnant woman, to board in U.S. Navy ship for further medical attention. They put me to the big room with other 4 pregnant women and their family, and they treat us very kindly and take good care of us. Captain Jacobs ordered Don Cox to take care of us. But all we knew was that Don Cock come to our room every day, at least 3 times a day, to take us to the cafeteria for meal. And if we need anything else, he would get it for us.
Each morning, Captain Jacobs visited the pregnant women, and each morning he delivered a pep talk encouraging them to get busy and start having their babies.
He always smiled. He told us he want at least 1 baby born on the ship and named after the USS Kirk.
Despite the captain's encouragement, none of the women gave birth at sea.
There was one lady who went into labor, but she stopped. And I remember Falkenberg, HM3 Falkenberg, said, "Chief, what are we going to do if one of these ladies has a baby?" And I said, "Well, we're going to witness the miracle of birth, Pastor Falkenberg."
If the officers and men of USS Kirk would not witness the miracle of birth aboard their vessel, soon enough they would contend with the tragedy of loss.
We had a young boy who had pneumonia, and we figured out the pediatric dose, and he was basically cured of his pneumonia, pediatric dose for penicillin. And so he was basically cured. But unfortunately, in the act of feeding him, he coughed or somehow aspirated what his mother was feeding him, and he died.
He was there almost reached freedom, but he died. It was very tragic and very sad, and I felt very sorry for the family.
We all got dressed up in our formal uniforms and conducted a burial at sea at night. And it was profoundly emotional. All the crew members that were not on watch were back there. It was just well done, and I think the Vietnamese family really appreciated how we handled that situation.
We performed the service in the most professional manner that we could, us not having done it before, but if you would, following the directions of Captain Jacobs. And in playing taps, it really hit home. What these people were going through.
Despite the tragedy, the flotilla plodded steadily eastward across the South China Sea, a body of water not noted for its placidity. With each sunrise, both landsmen and experienced seafarers among the vessels noted the uncharacteristic calm.
The sea was calm as a lake. It was very, very mild, and that allowed us to work well with the ships. Some of the ships were not very seaworthy, and this allowed them to be able to transit. It also allowed the Kirk to continue to use its small boats in transferring people back and forth and materials back and forth. So it was a gift from God that we had such wonderful, wonderful conditions.
A miracle to have 7 days with flat sea. People live on the deck, openly on the deck. Thousands of people, and children, women, old people. If the sea was rough, they certainly would be a disaster.
Feeding and providing water to more than 30,000 refugees was too big a job for Kirk alone. Soon, other Navy vessels joined the flotilla to lend a hand and provide food and the temporary loan of several corpsmen, medical supplies, and tons of rice to Kirk.
The Mobile sent over tons, I'm sure it was tons of rice. We loaded up through the stern transom of our ship, the variable depth sonar, a whole working party full of bags and bags of rice that we were using for distribution to the ships that we were looking after.
During that first week of May, one busy day melded into the next as Kirk's gig and motor whaleboat shuttled back and forth among the fleet.